Right now at 5, they work for the president. Now they're convicted felons.
And just because Michael Cohen made a plea deal doesn't mean that implicates the president on anything.
Tonight, questions about what's next.
He committed a crime. He should be indicted. If he were not president, he clearly would be indicted and jailed.
After Paul Manafort is found and Michael Cohen pleads guilty. Well, the biggest question surrounds Michael Cohen's claim in federal court yesterday that he violated campaign finance laws at then-candidate Trump's direction. In one tweet, the president said, quote, "If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen." CBS 4's Mola Lenghi is live tonight in Washington, D.C. with what kind of legal jeopardy the president might be in. Mola.
Well, Rudabeh, Elliott, the president's legal exposure remains unclear, but at the very least, he is in an uncomfortable position at the center of what can really only be described as a legal storm. This, as special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation only intensifies. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders faced questions about the two men close to President Trump now guilty of felonies.
The president did nothing wrong. There are no charges against him.
Mr. Trump's former personal attorney Michael Cohen took a plea deal Tuesday, and a jury found former campaign chairman Paul Manafort guilty on tax fraud charges.
It's not a good day for the president.
Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis, told CBS This Morning if Mr. Trump was not the president, he'd be indicted. Cohen said Mr. Trump directed him to make hush payments to two women in advance of the 2016 election.
It's not about evidence. It is definitive, indisputable, that Donald Trump's lawyers said in a letter to the special counsel that President Trump directed, the same word that Michael Cohen used in court yesterday under oath, directed Michael Cohen to make illegal payments.
The developments come as President Trump faces a potential Democratic takeover of Congress this fall, but lawmakers are reluctant to discuss impeachment.
Every single remedy, including indictment of the president, should be on the table.
President Trump tweeted that Cohen's violations are not a crime and that I feel very badly for Paul Manafort. Such respect for a brave man. The president's reaction has some wondering if he plans to pardon Manafort.
A pardon in this circumstance would be perceived by many Americans as, interfering with an investigation.
Democrats want Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation halted, saying if he joins the high court, he may have a role in determining the legal fate of the president who nominated him. Well, looking forward, Michael Cohen will face sentencing in December. Meanwhile, Paul Manafort will have to endure yet another trial, this time here in Washington, D.C. federal court beginning next month. Elliott, Rudabeh.
Mola, thank you. And New York State investigators just issued a subpoena for Michael Cohen. They now want to talk to him as part of their investigation into the Trump Foundation. This comes hours after the president took to Twitter this morning to address the convictions of both Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. But his response to yesterday's events are very different for the two men headed to prison.
For more than a decade, Michael Cohen was President Trump's lawyer and fixer. But on Wednesday, Mr. Trump expressed his sense of betrayal, tweeting, "If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen." On Tuesday, Cohen pled guilty to tax evasion and campaign finance violations. He admitted under oath that Mr. Trump directed him to make hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal for the primary purpose of influencing the election.
Committed a crime. He should be indicted. If he were not president, he clearly would be indicted and jailed.
On CBS This Morning, Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis, said Cohen also has information that would be of interest to special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation on Russian interference.
I can tell you that he is committed 100% to telling the truth to governmental authorities.
In another tweet today, the president made the contradictory statement that Cohen pled guilty to 2 counts of campaign finance violations that are not a crime. At the White House today, the president's press secretary maintained he did nothing wrong.
As the president has stated on numerous occasions, he did nothing wrong. There are no charges against him in this. And just because Michael Cohen made a plea deal doesn't mean that implicates the president on anything.
The president's tune about Cohen very different than former campaign chairman Paul Manafort. The president tweeting this morning, "I felt very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family. Justice took a 12-year-old tax case, among other things, applied tremendous pressure on him, and unlike Michael Cohen, he refused to make up stories in order to get a deal. Such respect for a brave man." Manafort faces the next decade in prison on 8 convictions on tax and bank fraud not tied to the Trump campaign.
He is evaluating all of his options at this point.
Sources close to Manafort tell CBS News he's banking on a presidential pardon.
Once again, that's not something that has been up for discussion. I don't have anything for you on that.
But first, he faces another trial later this year in Washington, D.C. The charges in that case, including conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, and acting as an unregistered foreign agent for Ukrainian interests.
Prosecutors have until August 29th to decide what they plan to do about a possible retrial for Paul Manafort on the 10 counts jurors couldn't agree on. The office also declined to comment on yesterday's